Yes, there you go. All right. So the Middle Passage was that second stage, right, where we would take slaves from Africa and bring them to specifically the Caribbean, right, and then they would come up here. So since it's illegal now to bring in slaves from Africa. So we have this thing, and they call it the Second Middle Passage. Yeah.
Could you bring in slaves from other places?
No.
So you couldn't like, take them to Britain and then bring them to America?
No. You couldn't import slaves. It was illegal to import slaves. Yes. Yeah. I'm sure there's people who did, because people are sneaky, smuggling slaves in. But like I said, I mean, if they're 1/3 of the population of the South already, we're doing good on numbers, right? So over 2 million slaves were sold between 1820 and 1860. A majority to local buyers, but hundreds of thousands from older states to importing states of the lower South. Okay, what does that mean? What do you think the older states means?
The first original eastern states?
Yes, okay, so we have the creation of Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, right? They're added to the South, they now do slavery. The older states are going to be Georgia, Carolinas, Virginia, Florida's still, Spain, Alabama, Tennessee even. So we see those states who have a large number of slaves, okay, smaller plantation sizes, are selling their slaves to now these new states that are being huge cotton producers, okay? And so they're importing from state to state, but we're not actually importing from other countries anymore, okay? And auctions of slaves took place at public slave markets, as in New Orleans, or at poorhouses. So what would happen is you would see, in the newspaper, there would be an advertisement, and it would say, Saturday, December, whatever this Saturday is, the 12th, 14th, yep, that's close. We're getting really close. Semester. That's all I know is next Thursday is the 19th, because that's think about it. So what would happen is you'd see in a local newspaper, if you were a slave owner or a farmer or something like that, you'd look at the newspaper and you would see an ad, and it would say, okay, down in the square this Saturday, we're going to have an auction. Okay, these are the slaves that are going to be available, that we have available. Come down with your money and buy them, right? So that was a huge way that they moved these slaves from state to state, okay? They also had courthouses, so if it was a smaller transaction. So if you were talking to Dave down the street and you're like, you know what, I really need a house, a house slave. And he's like, well, I have an extra one, so then you guys would go down to the courthouse and you would do a legal exchange. Because remember, what are slaves? Property. They're property. They're property. They're thought of as property, like a table. Yeah.
You can't import them, but you can legally trade them.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of farmers, if they weren't doing very well economically, they would sell their slaves to get some money. Yeah. Just like, we would sell other things, so. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Put it out on Craigslist kind of thing. Okay? All right. Southern states and municipalities. Oh, this is one of those words again. Municipalities.
Say that in Spanish.
Oh, what?
I had to say that in Spanish.
How do you say it in Spanish?
I'm not going to try.
Oh, okay. See, it's every time I look at it. This is one of those words. I do this every time.
Municipality.
Municipalities, thank you. Okay. Earn revenue by taxing the sale of slaves. So what are municipalities then? What are those? So if we're looking at it in context of the
It's some sort of government.
kind of, yes. Or maybe
Are they tax collectors?
no.
Would be like, wouldn't they be paying for like water and stuff like that?
No.
Like, not appropriation, but like,
So we're closer with governments. Okay, so if we're looking at southern states and municipalities, what?
territories?
Closer.
Cities?
What?
Cities?
I like territories with what? What was your keyword? With the government. Okay, good.
Okay.
all right? So it's not technically a state. So we're looking now would be like Oklahoma, the Oklahoma area, part of the Arkansas area. Texas wasn't quite Texas yet. Kansas, there was some areas in Kansas. So it's where it's owned, right? But it's not really a state yet, but it's still slavery. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So these areas, all of these areas, these southern states, municipalities, yeah, over here, and we have some, like Kentucky, there were some areas of Kentucky too, where they earn revenue by taxing the sale of the slaves. Okay, so these areas were actually earning revenue by taxing the slaves, okay? Which is great for the economy, right? Yay! Right, it is, yeah. Okay? The Cotton Kingdom could not have arisen without the internal slave trade, and the economies of older states like Virginia came increasingly to rely on the sale of slaves. Okay? So now it's not even about just picking cotton, having, plantations and stuff growing. It is literally a part of the economy. It's driving the economy, especially in some of those older states that we talked about. Virginia, Georgia, the Carolinas, right? We see the economy depending on this internal slave trade. Okay? So does that make it easy to get rid of?
No.
If you were a governor or something of a state that had slavery, would you want to get rid of slavery? Not necessarily, right? I mean, there were exceptions, obviously. But, no. If it's making your economy awesome and giving you money, why would you want to get rid of it? Right? All right. Okay. So just some more little pictures. Once again, no color. This one's a little easier. Okay. The yellow here is where the cotton was grown. South, right? It's literally every southern. So we can kind of see it's in Florida, goes all the way down to southern Texas, kind of goes back up and around, okay? So every southern state grows some amount of cotton, even if it's a little bit in Oklahoma, right? Okay? So we have over here, here's an illustration of slaves picking, they're now using, what is this? Do you guys know, remember what this is? It was invented by somebody really important. Starts with Eli. What? No, what did you say? I said you said Eli went to the CC's grant. Oh. No, not it's a cotton. Close. Eli Whitney invented it.
Oh, I know.
I've never even heard of the cotton gin. I talked about this in class. Yeah,
It might
I
be the
remember
other
this.
class.
No. Okay, I'll talk about it right now. So Eli Whitney, so if you want to make a note, if you need, because it's important history stuff. Eli Whitney, he's a really smart guy. He's like, you know what? I could make picking cotton easier. Because remember, I showed you that tuft of cotton, but there were all those brambles and stuff with it, and like the leaves, and those would die and they would get stuck in it, and then you'd pick it out and it would get all dirty. And so what used to happen is the slaves would have to pull it apart and pick all the stuff out of it, and the seeds, you have to get the seeds out. Well, the cotton gin actually aided in the cleaning of the cotton. So it would do all of that. Kind of like, remember what I was talking about with the thing on the end of the tractor? It would do that automatically. So they would feed it through the cotton gin, and it would clean